24 this time.
24, yeah.
And you essentially had a pact with consciousness, God, the universe, and said, if I'm healed, I will commit my life to this.
If this works,
Yeah.
because, you know, I was educated, I knew a lot about the spine, you know, and I'm talking to orthopedic surgeons that are telling me, you're never going to walk again. And I'm talking to orthopedic surgeons that are telling me, you don't have much flexibility in your spine. And I'm thinking, you may not have any flexibility in your spine, but I have a whole lot more flexibility than you do, right? And so I had to weigh what I knew against what I didn't know. And I think that's really that moment. That's a dark night of the soul, right? Because you can't ask anybody their opinion because they're not you, and nobody gets you but you, because you're the one that has to make the choice, right? So I had a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of lonely nights, you know, and when I started noticing those changes, then my belief in what I was doing was just amplified by tenfold. In other words, I wasn't dreading doing it any longer. I was looking forward to doing it because I knew something was changing. You know, so all I needed was one thing. Just notice. As soon as I noticed that one thing changed, I'm like, okay, whatever I'm doing is starting to work. Now I had more ambition, more passion, more presence, more clarity, more intention, more creativity, and I was able to control my mind a lot better. So when I got back on my feet, I was like a different person. I mean, the homes and the cars and the money and all that stuff, it just wasn't as important to me any longer because I was like on my feet again. Like I just wanted to sit at the table with my buddies and have dinner. I just wanted to take a shower. Like, you know, I wanted to use the toilet. Like I wanted to watch the sunset. I mean, I wasn't taking anything for granted. Like if I duffed a shot on a golf course, I'd be like, who the hell cares? I was just different. And I couldn't go back to my same life any longer because I was not the same guy. I'd been initiated in a lot of ways. And I was taking information that was kind of theoretical and philosophical and really just speculating on, is it possible, right? And I just, when I produced those effects, I thought, oh my God, I can't go back to my life any longer. I'm a different person. So I moved to the Pacific Northwest. And I wondered for the longest time what happened to me. Like what exactly, how did it, if it happened, how did that happen? You know, so there were no traditional textbooks that were talking about any of this. And I used to go to the University of Washington Library and sit there for hours trying to find information that would at least tell me like how it's possible that I could get vertebral height back after a compression fracture. Like how is that possible? What is, if bones are made of proteins, how were genes signaled? If I changed my mind, how did I change my mind? If my mind did affect my body, how did my mind affect my body? And if I have to pay attention in order to do that, you know, what is the process of paying attention? So I'd sold everything, and I bought a ranch, raised my kids out in the country, drank water out of the ground, had our gardens, you know, it was just kind of a cool time. And I had a lot of time on my hands to think, you know, a lot of time. So I was investigating all these ideas, and I couldn't find it in the traditional models. I found it more in neuroplasticity and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, epigenetics, what's that? You know, electromagnetism, quantum. I remember reading something that said you cannot explain a cut, the physiology of a cut, without a quantum understanding of reality. And I thought, well, that's really interesting because the mechanistic model says it's charges and then, you know, it's molecules. It's not like that at all. It's something else. And so I embarked on this journey, and then I thought, God, are there other people that ever had similar experiences that I had that that healed their body in some way? And that's when I started studying spontaneous remissions. And so I traveled to over 17 different countries and interviewed people that were treating conventionally or unconventionally. They were staying the same or getting worse. And all of a sudden they got better. And I wanted to know what the cause was that produced that effect. Now,
of the spontaneous remission.
Of the spontaneous remission.
Or would that be called a healing?
Quantum healing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Like they got better.
They got better. But
the prognosis was not good. They had terminal health condition, a chronic health condition, and then it went away.
and we didn't know why.
No one knows. No one knew why. The doctors didn't know. Nobody knew why, but I was curious, right?
So you went to all these countries and interviewed these people.
A lot of people, over hundreds and hundreds of people, and it was a lot just to create a way, a methodology to be able to gather these stories. Anyway, I was a Puritan at the time. I made my own Essene bread. I was vegan.
Really?
I was.
You had a garden. You were planting your own food. You were doing everything.
My whole life. I was always health-minded. I did yoga. I did martial arts. I thought you could heal anything with yoga. I thought his diet was super important, vitamins, whatever. And I was looking for the commonalities, and that wasn't a commonality. And I was a Puritan at the time, and I was just like,
those weren't a commonality.
They were not. Maybe
some people had
but
that.
It wasn't common.
It wasn't all.
No, but there were other common things that were more prominent than that.
Really?
And it was really interesting because one of them was that the majority of the people believed that there was some intelligence within them that was beyond their senses, that they could not experience with their senses. They couldn't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or feel it. But there was a power that was within them, whatever you want to call that, that was giving them life. And they thought the probability that we're seeing the truth of reality is zero. Everything that I'm perceiving with my senses in three-dimensional reality is fooling me into the illusion of separation. Time is the separation between 2 points of consciousness. So you could actually shorten the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of having it.
Wow. One of the most sought-after speakers in the world.
New York Times best-selling author,
a pioneer in emerging science and spirituality.
Dr. JoeDispenza.
Please give a warm welcome to Dr. JoeDispenza.
They tell me I'm going to be paralyzed either way, so why don't I roll the dice, right, and just take a chance? There's an intelligence that's giving me life, okay? It's a consciousness. It must be aware of me.
And you essentially had a pact with consciousness, God, the universe, and said, if I'm healed, I will commit my life to this.
I was educated. I knew a lot about the spine. I'm talking to orthopedic surgeons that are telling me, you're never going to walk again. There's energy for miracles. We see them all the time. There's energy for healing. We see it all the time. There's energy for the mystical. We see it all the time.
Yeah.
And you collapse time and space. And when you do that, then the synchronicities, serendipities, the coincidences, the opportunities start to prove to you that you're actually the creator of your life instead of the victim of your life. If your vision is to be wealthy, if your vision is to be in love, if your vision is to be, I don't know, whatever it is, to have a mystical experience, and you're here, I tell my kids this from the time they were little.
I'm so excited about this episode with Dr. JoeDispenza. He is one of our biggest guests of all time with over 55 million views on our videos. So if you like this, make sure to share it with one friend and leave a like or a comment below. Also, big announcement, Dr. Joe is a keynote speaker at this year's Summit of Greatness in Los Angeles in September. Make sure you get your tickets. The link is below, or you can go to summitofgreatness.com to see Dr. Joe live. Welcome back, everyone, to the School of Greatness. Very excited about our guest. We have the inspiring Dr. JoeDispenza in the house. Good to see you once again, my friend.
Great to be with you, Louis, as always.
Very excited. I was telling you beforehand that our interviews on YouTube have done over 55 million views together over the last 5 years since we've had you on, many different interviews.
How many interviews have I done?
Probably 5, I'm assuming. 4 or 5. And maybe 6, I don't know. But people love when you're on here. I've been to your event, 7-day, week-long event that is incredible. And the things I witnessed there within myself about how my mind and my body transformed was so powerful. And things I witnessed from others were extremely powerful. We're going to talk about some of that work that you're doing today. But I think people are just resonating with your message because they're confused about the world, they're confused about their mind, they're confused about their body, they're confused about the struggles and the challenges that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. They want to learn how to simplify their life. They want to learn how to draw on their life, attract their desired future. They want to learn how to manifest better. They want to learn how to have a more peaceful, harmonious life. And they don't understand how to tap into the energy, the frequencies, the pharmaceutical healing powers within us, not outside of us, because we think it's all outside of us. And you talk about a lot of this. You have incredible best-selling books. We're going to talk about the documentary as well. But before we get into how, what, and why people can start accessing these things. Can you share for people who maybe don't fully know your context of your story, how you even got into this, what you've discovered before and what you're starting to discover now in terms of this work in this space?
Sure. First of all, thank you
Of course.
for all of that. I think I just was raised in a family where I had two parents that were, my mother was first generation Italian, my father was from Italy, and they were very family-based and they loved their children, and whatever interests that my brother and I had, they would fully support and endorse. And so I was a curious kid, but was also very Western, played, sports just like everybody. And then I read a book by Paramahansa Yogananda, and when I was 19 years old, Autobiography of a Yogi. And what intrigued me the most was I was raised in a very traditional Roman Catholic family, that there were other things happening that I was unaware of, these saints and these mystics in the book that had really powerful effects on reality, caused me to start thinking differently. And so I kind of got really super involved in yoga, super involved in martial arts. It was unpredictable for me to do anything like that, but somehow it piqued my interest. And then went through college, went through graduate school, moved to San Diego, and had a martial arts studio, had a yoga studio.
Really?
Yeah.
Were you teaching yoga, or were you just
Yeah,
owned the
I was
studio?
teaching yoga in the 80s when people
on.
said that you were going to get possessed by yoga. Like I had challenges because nobody did yoga. So I had a yoga studio right in Pacific Beach in San Diego. And I also spent a lot of time studying hypnosis because I had roommates in college that were deep state somnambulists. They would sleep and talk to each other in their sleep the entire time.
Really?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. And I was running through a building in undergraduate school at Rutgers University. I was going to my organic chemistry class, and I saw this piece of, you remember, I don't know if you remember, but they used to hang papers like this, and they would cut the bottoms with the phone
number? Yeah.
I saw it said, "Learn while you sleep." And I just ripped that tag off, and I thought, I'm taking 21 credits that semester. I was taking a lot of credits. And I'm like, this could help me, and it was really about hypnosis. So I started reading about hypnosis while I was taking 21 credits, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to class and not have to take any notes. I wanted to learn everything right in class so I didn't have to study, and that I could just replay the lecture by the end of the day, and I would remember as much as I could. So it required, a little bit of programming for that. Anyway, long story short, I took a good portion of my college loan, and I went to a school that taught different levels of hypnosis, from hypnotist all the way to clinical hypnotherapist.
Really?
I put over 500 hours in studying it. And I started my own practice, and that's how I generated money to go to chiropractic college. And I started witnessing some pretty amazing changes in people, like right before my eyes. Like there was some power to the mind that I saw. The effects were taking place right in front of me, which of course piqued my interest again. I got decent at the fact that I didn't have to take any notes when I went to school, and ran a clinical practice. And then when I moved from Atlanta to San Diego to start my life after I'd graduated, I started doing triathlons, and that was kind of the hotbed where triathlons were.
San Diego, SoCal.
Yeah, Southern California. I sponsored all the 10K races in San Diego, and then I was in a triathlon. I got run over by a truck, and I broke 6 vertebrae in my spine, and the prognosis was pretty bad.
How old are you at this time now?
I was probably 24 years old. It was 1986, 24, 23 years old. And the typical surgical procedure for something like that is pretty radical. And I've talked about this on your show, but they wanted to put long rods in my spine, the length of my spine pretty much, because the 6 vertebrae were right in the middle of my spine, T8, T9, T10, T11, T12, and L1. And the top one had broken more than 60%, compressed more than 60%, and the neural arch was broken like a pretzel, you know. So anyway, you drill the rods in and it cantilevers the spine, you know, the spinal column off the spinal cord.
It's not much flexibility in that afterwards.
You know, that was my big thing, right? Because we had 4 opinions from 4 leading surgeons, and they were all saying surgery, surgery, surgery. In 1986, you really just didn't tell a doctor you weren't going to have surgery. In fact, they thought I had a head injury when I was saying I don't want to have the surgery. But I thought, listen, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. They're telling me I'm going to be paralyzed either way, you know, so why don't I roll the dice, right? And just take a chance. There's a intelligence that's giving me life. Okay, it's a consciousness. It must be aware of me. And when you're conscious, you're aware. When you're aware, you're paying attention. When you're paying attention, you're present. So if it's a consciousness, it's present with me. So I got to get present with it. I got to give it a plan. I give it a design. I got to give it very specific orders. And then I got to surrender because I can't do it. This intelligence knows how to heal way better than I do. Anyway, theoretically, it sounds really good, but I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do. I just kept going to the worst case scenario. I'm going to live in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. Should I sell my practice? Should I sell my home? I'm never going to walk again, you know. And I couldn't control my mind. And that was the part that really intrigued me the most, because I read the book where the mystics were doing all these kind of incredible miracles and healings. And I witnessed some of the powers of the mind when I was doing hypnosis, and I knew I had to get beyond my analytical thinking mind to get into the operating system to make a change, and I couldn't control my mind. And it was a dark night of the soul for me, because I kept going to the worst case scenario instead of the future that I wanted. And I think when we're pressed in stress or survival, you always prepare for the worst, right?
Yes.
There's better chances of survival. So for me, I couldn't control my mind, and that became the obsession. And it took me hours and hours. I have nothing else to do, really. It took me hours and hours and hours to really go through a process, and where I felt like I was complete enough and present enough that I gave it a good message. Because if my mind was wandering all over the place, I knew that the signal I was giving it wasn't clear. So anyway, what I didn't know is that I was learning how to pay attention and be present. And I was also firing and wiring a whole new set of circuits in my brain that was creating a new level of mind. And then it got easier, and then what took me 3.5 hours to do, I was doing in 45 minutes. And then the outcomes started to produce changes in my body, sensory motor changes, pain levels in my back, everything was changing. And I knew right in that moment that whatever I was doing inside of me was producing an effect outside of me. In other words, I was causing an effect.
You weren't taking pills or medication?
No. There was not an option. They wanted to put me in a body cast. They came and fitted me for this full cast.
Oh,
you know?
man.
And they told me I had to wear it for a year.
Oh.
Anyway, long story short, it worked. And I was back on my feet in 12 weeks. 10 weeks, I was back in my life in 12 weeks doing everything I was doing before. And during that time, I just said, look, if I said to this intelligence, if I'm ever able to walk again, I'll spend the rest of my life, I promise, studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter. And kind of, for the most part, I've been doing that ever since. So anyway,
you're 23, 24